Let's take a closer look at the methods we'll use in the My Favorite Movies app. Here's the documentation for the movie database. I've posted a link to this documentation in the instructor notes. If we scroll down a little bit here on the left, this section on the right gives us a list of all the methods provided by the API. I'm going to select Account and then go to Account ID Favorite right here. This is a method that we'll be using in My Favorite Movies. As you might expect, this method can be used to add or remove movies from an account's favorite list. You can see we have this information about the required parameters as well as this required JSON body section. The JSON body, also known as the HTTP body, is part of an HTTP request that allows us to pass parameters without having to pass them in the URL like we've done before. We'll start using the JSON body when we make our first post request later in this lesson. For now, I want you to focus on an extremely useful feature of the movie database's documentation. If we click this post banner here, a pane will slide out from the right, and in this pane we can take a look at example request. This is very much like the API Explorer that we saw with Flickr. So let's scroll down a little bit, and it gives us this really nice boilerplate code that we can use to call each of the methods in the API. So for this particular example, we're calling HTTP, here's the URL, for account ID favorite. Notice it has ID in red because you'd have to substitute in an ID value for the user ID. But if we keep going down, we can see in SURL session, these are some classes that we're familiar with. And this is really nice. If we continue to scroll to the bottom, we can see an example response. And for this particular method, the response returns a status code and a status message. And if it's successful, it says the item/record was updated successfully. So before you get started, I'd highly recommend just taking some time with the documentation and clicking some of the other methods and taking a look at their example responses and their example boilerplate code here to actually make the network request. If we look back at the required parameters section, we see this parameter called session ID. What's this parameter all about? Well, if you do some digging, you'll find that the movie database uses sessions whenever we want to write data using the API. And by write, I'm referring to the methods that update or change data that's stored in the movie database. So this would include methods like account ID favorite, where we're changing an account's favorite list. It might also include methods for rating a movie. There's some separate documentation about sessions that's located on the movie database's main website that I'm looking at now. I'll post a link for this in the instructor notes as well. This page details how to create and use a session and its associated session ID. Without reading the entire page, we see that the basic workflow requires us to create a new request token, and then we can either do step 2A or step 2B. Step 2A says ask the user for permission via the website, or we can ask the user for permission via the API, and then in step 3 we create that session ID that we just saw in the documentation. Now you'll notice for step 2 we do have these two different ways of asking the user for permission. One uses the website and one uses the API. In this lesson we're going to use step 2B, and we're going to ask the user for permission via the API, and then in the next lesson we're going to ask the user for permission via the website. So you'll get to look at both approaches. Now if you haven't already, I highly encourage you to go through this page and read it yourself. And some of the terms might not make sense yet, but start building a mental picture of the steps required to create a session, because a session is what we're going to need to make our first post request and actually favorite movies, right? The My Favorite Movies app. So we'll need to be able to do that. Before we go on, let's talk to Travis and see what he has to say about authentication and the movie database.